Do your MIDI drums sound robotic and lifeless? Maybe you're not a drummer and you don't know the techniques in order to make your MIDI drums sound more realistic. Over the past 15 years of drumming, I've been able to learn techniques that I believe will be of value to you when it comes to making your MIDI drums sounding realistic. The first thing that you need to consider is choosing the right drum sounds. Now this will obviously depend on the genre that you're creating a beat for. For example, a rock kit will sound very different to a jazz kit. There are many different drum software instruments out there that you can use to create your beats. A few of my favourite drum software instruments include the Drum Machine Designer in Logic Pro. This is my go-to for EDM beat creation, because you can just drag and drop any sample that you like into it and edit it however you like. There are other great stock drums within Logic as well that I tend to use when I want to make a more realistic sounding acoustic kit. Then there's Labs, which is a great plugin for different instrument types, but they also offer some great software instruments for drums. When you're creating your beats, it's important to remember that most drummers only have 2 hands and 2 feet. So when you're creating a realistic sounding drum beat, it's important to remember not to overplay. Think about an imaginary drummer and how they would look when playing your beat. Just like any other instrument, time signatures apply to drums too. You can make your drum beats up of quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, and so on. The tempo or speed of a drum kit affects the overall feel and vibe of a track, but keep in mind the style and genre that you're producing that drum beat for. Faster tempos tend to work for energetic genres such as breakbeat or punk, while slower tempos might be better suited for more laid-back genres such as ballads or cocktail jazz. When working with MIDI drums, changing the tempo of a drum track is as simple as going into the global settings of your DAW and changing the tempo. This will automatically change the playback speed of all the MIDI notes within your DAW. So I just find that I have so much more control when I'm using MIDI notes to produce my drums. Another crucial element of programming realistic sounding MIDI drums is to know that you shouldn't over quantize those MIDI notes. If you don't know what quantization is, then quantization is the process of making those MIDI notes in time with your track. But if you use quantizing in the wrong way when producing drums, it can make them sound too robotic or too artificial. Now obviously if you're not great with tempo and your MIDI notes are out of time with the track, then you can use quantization then. Dynamics play a huge role when it comes to playing drums, just like any other instrument. Dynamics refer to the change in volume or intensity of the notes that are being played. For example, hitting a snare drum with a load of power will make a louder sound, whereas if you hit it softer, it'll make a quieter and more delicate sound. To create a more realistic drum performance, it's important to pay attention to the dynamics in your beat. This might mean varying the velocity or intensity of each note that is being played in your beat. Now obviously you can get a drummer to play this beat for you instead of programming it yourself, but if I'm being honest, the best way to do it is by learning how to do it yourself. Because if you get to a stage where you can learn how to program realistic sounding drums, then you won't have to spend money on getting a real drummer to play that beat for you. And it also levels up your production game as a whole and increases your value as a producer. If you want to see more content like this around music production and music theory, then make sure to subscribe, because all I want to do is help to level up your music production game and help you to become the best producer that you can be. When it comes to producing realistic sounding drum beats, there's one technique that I use that can be really effective, and that's when you sample individual drum hits and program them as MIDI notes. The way I do this is by using a pre-made loop and dragging that into my DAW, and then I cut out each hit, bounce it in place, and drag it into a sampler like Drum Machine Designer. From there, I use MIDI to sequence the individual drum hits alongside the drum loop. I found this technique to give me more control over my beat, so that I'm not just relying on the pre-made loop that I've just dragged and dropped into my project. And using this technique has helped me to gain the skill of turning any drum loop that I like into programmed MIDI notes. If this technique that I use is too much for you, then all you need to do is use MIDI groove templates or MIDI patterns as a starting point. You can always develop how you program your drums from there. If you're worried that these techniques are going to take you way too long to produce your beats, which in some cases might be true, especially if you're a beginner producer, then I've got the video just for you, and you can watch that video right here. This video will help you to speed up your beat production process and get you into a faster workflow.